How are you? This is Jeff Barnes, host of No Huddle Necessary here on the Nuts and Bolts Sports Network. Coming to you with a very special interview tonight. Um, this is not going to be sports related, so if you are tuning in for a sports show, tonight is not the night. What we're doing tonight is we're coming to you with a special conversation on policing in the Black community. Um, Joining me tonight is my co-founder of CoachCoverToDraft.com, Alex Alston III. And we have a unique perspective on this. And if you're not familiar with us, we're both, once again, scouts. We scout for the NFL draft, but also we are sons of policemen. So we have this whole unrest that's going on right now. And you have everything from Black Lives Matter to Blue Lives Matter and the conflicts that are between. We're talking about the big problems with police brutality. So we're going to talk to you about it. One, about our experiences. One, and of course, coming from a police background, Black males and things we may have faced. And one, our perspective on maybe trying to bridge this gap. So I'm going to take Alex off mute and let him say hello to everybody.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thanks for having me on, Coach.
Thank you. Thank you. And for those that don't know, Alex is the son of one of my former coaches and friends. I've played for him. I coached with him, Al Alston. Al Alston is a former member of the NYPD. My father spent 30 years in the New York State court system. I have his actual retired shield with me. I keep it with his flag from his funeral. He left this last year. So when it comes to first experiences with law enforcement, for us, it happened inside of the home. Some people don't get that. The first time you walk out the house as a kid and you start dealing with law enforcement is in the street. For us, those were our fathers. Our fathers wore a shield, went out the house every day to go to work, and there was a chance they weren't coming home. So that perspective is totally different. So, going back to it, and there's certain things that have happened over the years with us that we're going to talk about as well. Tell me, Alex, growing up, tell me about how things were in your household as far as having a father in law enforcement.
Well, my parents are strict right off the bat, even from when my grandparents raised them. And it was just something that discipline, hard work was just something that was bestowed upon me. It was tough because there was nothing that we could get away with. Like, they always knew if we were up to something. And because of what was going on out there in the real world, they tried to really shield us and keep us active in a lot of activities, or just kept us inside with a lot of games and toys. So they were strict on that part. But growing up, it was cool having a dad that was an officer, that first worked with the warrant squad and then eventually got into corrections. And he did that all the way up until I was in I would say, 4th or 5th grade. And then that's when he made the career change into more social work. And yeah, I mean, from growing up, from the moment we were able to comprehend what was going on to even till now, we're constantly just being taught. They're constantly just teaching us what's going on, just how to be aware, and that, yes, times are changing, but certain things still remain the same. So, yeah. So that's what it was like, growing up with a law enforcement father. I mean, even for football, like, everything that we did growing up was just always involved discipline, whether it was football, martial arts, school. So it was going to be strict on me regardless. So.
Gotcha. When it came down to it, and you guys are from Mount Vernon. And if anybody doesn't know Mount Vernon, New York, Mount Vernon, for the most part, is a very tough town. So, I'm pretty sure you had friends who weren't exactly on the best behavior all the time. So, how did your father react to some of your friends?
Oh, wow. Well, they tried to put us in an environment where we would be around kids that was somewhat like us or with similar backgrounds. But we understood there was some kids that was probably going the other way, and they allowed us to hang out with them up to a certain point. Until they felt like, all right, it's getting a little out of hand, then it's time to pull back. Like you said, Mount Vernon is a tough town. It is diverse. It is a diverse city, but it is predominantly African American. And the side of the town that I grew up on the south side, which is right around the corner from the projects. You know what I mean? So
I know O too well. I know O too well.
You just had to just be alert and just be aware of your surroundings growing up.
And I wholeheartedly understand that scenario. One thing about it, growing up in the northern part of the Bronx, when we moved into that neighborhood around 1980, 1981, I was still very young. I wasn't even in first grade yet. And coming from the middle of the Bronx, because where I went to school up until 8th grade was the true South Bronx. And when I say the true South Bronx, I'm talking about burnt out buildings. You had, true ghetto,
Right.
drugs in the streets, so, you look at those 80s movies with the graffiti on the trains, that's the Bronx that I went to school in every day. And then a lot of those years I went down there by myself. So I got to see the different spectrum for where my father moved us to. And where I wasn't totally innocent either. But
Right.
overall, it was a total night and day from where I was exposed to, even when I went down to visit family in Millbrook houses down in 138th Street, St. Anne's, Brook Avenue. That was the real South Bronx. So,
Right.
it was in the 80s, that was a tough neighborhood. And I got to see what my cousins went through. My aunt would tell you, take the elevator, do not go up those stairs, especially when it's dark, because you don't know. You don't know what's in the stairs, so there's a lot of things that we grew up with. And it kind of, like I said, having that different perspective of law enforcement all the way up until when you're a kid, you're real young, cops and robbers, I want to be the cop, you're the good guy. When you got to your teenage years, you started having a different perspective when you started walking out of the house. And when you realized that you were now looked at in a different light, because to me, law enforcement was like my father, until I walked out the house and you were looked at like, what are you up to? When cars roll by slowly to see what you were up to, just because you were in the street, so it became a different perspective. It became something different for me because, it was, I started to understand, and more later on in life, not so much when I was during my teenage years, why my father became so protective of me, during those situations, and especially as I got to my teens, early 20s, when he started teaching me certain things about how to interact with law enforcement. And it's kind of one of those things where I feel I kind of had an upper hand on some of my friends who ended up in the courthouse where my father was working. So I got to find out when they were in trouble because they eventually came past him in the courthouse. But there were certain things about law enforcement, and we have a whole hour at least to talk about this and try and understand, and shed some light to some people, because sometimes different perspective helps, and the big clash we're seeing now is everybody's up in arms about police brutality, and as well as they should be. There's a long history of it, and
correct.
We can get into that as we talk about it, but with every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And you're seeing this big push, and it was all lives matter. Now the blue lives matter is making a big push. And you're starting to see clashes at times because they're angry, and the perspective of a police officer is, I'm putting my life on the line when I take this badge and I go into the street, and they demand a certain level of respect. My father demanded it. I'm pretty sure your father demanded it when he put the badge on at times. And when they turn on the news and they see what they're seeing now, they don't feel respected. And I'm pretty sure the animosity is building on that side of the line, just like it's building on our side of the line as civilians.
Correct.
So, I mean, tell me what you're feeling about that situation.
Well, this is something that's been building up for years
Hmm.
upon years upon years, and throughout America's history, it's been the youth, the younguns, to step up and start the revolution. And as you know, with my background and what I've experienced, it's something that I feel has to be done because we've peacefully protested, we've asked, we've tried to elect, and nothing's ever worked except an angry response. Anger gets stuff done, and I'm not even gonna lie to you. I felt that anger because it's like we know how the script plays out. We know how it plays out. You know what I mean? And it was just something that I think people were just tired of. It was just tired of the regular scheduled programming, and this is what we got. So,
Absolutely, and I get
and
that. Yeah.
mhm. And I just feel like if people were more understanding and able to see both sides of things, we would have this resolved. Well, not
Hmm.
resolved, but on the path to resolution. Just see where we as Black people's coming from. Just see it from our perspective, just for
Hmm.
once. You know what I mean? Just like we see it, and it's making so many people uncomfortable. And to a degree, I enjoy them being uncomfortable because this is what it's like being us.
Hmm. And
So,
I feel you with that because honestly, and I've had the misfortune of having negative interactions with police officers. I've had the
correct.
good fortune of never ended looking down the gun, but I've had those interactions. And I think the one thing is the training that my father gave me before I left the house has kind of kept
Mm-hmm.
me at the point where I've been able to get through it, and without it escalating to something further. Because I realized the guy that's on the other side of this situation wasn't trying to de escalate anything. And
Right.
I think that's part of the problem we're having now. I think I have between family and friends, the amount of law enforcement that I know is it's unbelievable to think that that I would have so many people that I know that are either NYPD, state troopers. I know cops down here now in Florida.
Right.
My cousin is also Virginia Beach PD. My sister was a Baltimore police officer before she retired. So, I mean, the amount of law enforcement and military in my family alone, well, that's not counting my extended tree of friends and cohorts. Um,
Right. Right. Right.
but I get how some of them feel, and we talk about something all the time, and I've been very critical of this. Um, Law enforcement is going to want to stick together. We talk about the blue wall,
Correct.
and to me, that blue wall of silence has caused just as many problems as has helped these guys out, and I think that's part of the problem. And when it comes down to it, my father used to say 80% of your police force is good. There's that 20% that you want to get rid of.
Right.
Because those guys are the ones that are making it bad for everybody else. And in this case, when you look at it, that could be the case with a lot of things. But when it comes down to the police department, you know, I think when we got away from serve and protect, it became a big problem. All right. Because first of all, policing is not a job. Right. Anytime you put your life on the line for people you don't know, it's not a
Right.
job. It's just as much of a service as it is to be in the military because you're literally doing the same thing just here at home. You're not going out there. You're out there putting your life on the line for people you don't know. Okay. And it's
Correct.
one of the reasons why, and I'm just going to ask you about this later, but it's one of those reasons why, when it comes down to it, I didn't put on this badge myself. I didn't follow my father into law enforcement, although he wanted me to.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason was that says, well, to me, wearing the badge, you have to believe in what you're doing. That means there are people you're going to have to protect that you may not like or agree with. And
Correct.
if I'm not prepared to do that, then I'm not prepared. I'm not qualified to wear that badge. When I went to Grambling as a freshman, my daughter was born my middle of my freshman year, my oldest daughter. And at that point, when I left Grambling to come home and be a father, I said, at this point now, I've given up everything I wanted to do. There's two things I can do that I will not do. And that's going to be law enforcement and military. Why? Because at the end of the day, my priority is her. I want to make sure I'm there for her all the way until her adulthood. I don't want to put any other unfortunate risk to not be there for my daughter.
Right.
So, when my father pushed me to law enforcement, I kind of rebuked him and said no, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to put my life on the line in certain situations because I want to make sure I'm there for my daughter. She is priority to me. Right. So there are people, I've had this conversation with friends who are on the force, and they say, well, I'm not prepared to put my life on the line for certain people either. I said, well, then why are you wearing the badge? Because that's what you're doing. So when you have some of the shootings we've had, where guys say, I feared for my life, and it's turned out the situation had nothing to do with you fearing for your life. It's because of that mindset of, I'm not risking my life for this. I'm going to shoot first and take aims later. And that's part of the problem.
It became us versus them.
Yeah. That's a whole other story. But getting back to my question to you, all right, you've had a father in law enforcement. What made you not want to follow in those footsteps?
Well, as you know, I ended up double majoring in college in criminal justice and political science. And the original goal was to go into the DA's office. Law school, eventually to the DA's office, and take my career from there. And in regards to that, I couldn't see myself putting my life on the line for other people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Especially, like we see it, the constant disrespect. But everything that's going on, it was just something I didn't want to do. And plus, I didn't want to do anything to jeopardize my life. And nor I don't want to put myself in a situation where I might have to take somebody else's life. You know what I mean? I can't live with that on my conscience, taking somebody else's life.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That's something that you had to deal with. And me personally, I don't think I was capable of handling that. So that's what steered me away from it.
All right. And have you yourself ever had any kind of negative interaction with police?
A couple times. And it all happened back in college, to be honest with you. Just a background, at least in the city of Mount Vernon, I've never had any interactions with the cops like that because the majority of the cops grew up in the same community. Mm-hmm. Or they came from a similar community, so they know how to interact. They know how to talk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I went away to college, I mean, we had all our stuff on, our grays, our warm-up jackets, something with our school logo and to say that we played football. We're still getting pulled over. Where are you guys going? You know what I'm saying? Or one cop, we're coming back late from campus. Another cop want to talk really reckless and very explicit to us. And the only reason he let us go is because my friend in the car is a Marine. Mm-hmm. So then his whole tone changed. You know what I mean? So that's all my negative interactions have come away when I was in school, away outside of Mount Vernon. I never had issues with NYPD because, like you, I know people in NYPD. So if something was to happen, you just name drop. Oh, hey, I know such and such, this, that, the other, and it's fine. And then obviously, what happened on my school campus, it's not too far fetched to know what was going on up there. So, and I mean, like for example, it's actually been football that got me out of a couple tickets or a couple run-ins with the cops. One cop saw I went to Mount, and his first question was, "Did you guys beat Hayes?" I said, "Yes." He was like, "All right, cool. Have a good night." Or another interaction was, I was going to pick up my brother. He was out on a date, and a cop pulled me over. And he's talking to me, he's giving me the spiel, and you can hear the firmness in his voice. You can hear it. until he got my ID, saw who I was, and then realized, oh my God, I knew since you was a little kid, your father was my coach. You know what I'm saying? So it was just
Mm-hmm.
like, why did it take you to realize who I was for you to talk to me in a totally different tone?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that was I think that's another thing that frustrates me too. Is it's like, why do you have to know who I am or who I know for you just to talk to me regularly or just to see what's up? So I mean, if you come to somebody on guard and ready to go, that person, we're human. Our natural reaction is to either match that or go above that, you know.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
yeah,
And you know, for those that don't know, Alex played his football at Pace University, um, and it's come back into the spotlight with a couple of things that have gone on. Um, that people are calling for an investigation. While you were at Pace, one of your teammates was killed by a police officer in an incident
correct.
that happened. So why don't you, tell everybody that doesn't know about the situation what happened, how
Okay.
it affected you.
Okay, so my teammate was Delroy Henry, DJ Henry, and he was killed on homecoming in October 2010. He was my teammate. We played together my junior year. Because he originally played for Iona College. He actually
Hmm.
played with my cousin at Iona, and once their program closed up shop, he ended up transferring with me to my school, Pace. And I was actually playing for a minor league team, the Brooklyn Mariners, and we had a game that day, and I was too tired to go. I was actually supposed to be there. I was supposed to meet up with my fraternity brothers and my old teammates to see what was going on. And next thing you know, my phone is blowing up. I'm just getting phone calls. Yo, they shot DJ. They shot DJ. I'm like, who? Like, what could have happened? You know, you're thinking, all right, it's homecoming. Worst case scenario, maybe an outsider from campus came. You never would have thought that in that city, a law enforcement officer would have, shot and killed him. And it hurt because those were my teammates. Those were dudes that I saw damn near every day I went to war with on Saturday. I know their character. So you know how the story goes. Once something happens, they start trying to dig up and assassinate people's character, and it was just like I couldn't handle that because it's like I knew them. I know them. Excuse me.
Hmm.
And you go on the internet and you read those articles, and the first thing people want to say is thug. They deserved it. What was he doing?
Hmm.
And I'm just like, yo. And to be honest with you, growing up, I would say that could have been me. But it was the first time in my life I was like, yo, that really could have been me. It's just so
Yeah.
happens I was just too tired to actually go up there. And just to see the way the press and everybody was just slandering them. And on top of that, they awarded that cop Officer of the Year. Was another slap to the face.
Yeah.
And the fact that the police chief was a professor at the university too was another like, yo, what the hell is going on?
Hmm.
And it was something that was that never really went to trial. And that's what everything you see in everybody now. You see some of the celebrities. Just last week, DeAndre Hopkins posted something. It's just something that has to be reopened because he never got justice, and he deserves it. And when I tell people, it's like, yo, with the people protesting, I'm like, I'm familiar. I knew a victim, this is something that I lived through. And to be honest, I haven't been to that town in that area since that happened. And that's over 10 years ago. I have not gone to that area since then.
Wow.
It's, yeah.
You know, I haven't had anybody that close to me that's been in that situation. Um, my experiences with everything started back and this is a very popular case. If everybody remembers the Central Park Jogger case, all right. My father at the time worked at Manhattan Criminal, so he actually was there when those kids came through the courthouse, and so you always turned on the TV. That was the first thing you saw. Central Park Jogger. This, or we found out they caught 5 kids. Um, they've been arraigned. They've been this. They went to trial. Okay, so I remember the first conversation I had with my father about this case, and it's the first time I really started paying attention to what was going on in the community. What was going on, as I was at the time still in grade school. And he was telling me basically, these kids didn't do it. And looking at my father, who's, like I said, here he's in the courts. I'm watching TV. They're talking about all this evidence they got against the kids. You're seeing cops go up there and make their case to prosecute these kids. And my father's the one who sees these kids coming in and out. He's taking them up to the courtroom, taking them back down to the pens. These kids didn't do it. He says, yeah, they may have been in a park that night. They may have been, but these kids didn't rape that woman. And it's like, wow, I wouldn't expect it. Why would they do that? And he says, simple. They needed somebody to blame, and it's real easy to blame 5 minority kids. And then over the years, you started hearing about the things that happened when they were being interrogated, how their rights were being violated, and it took the years of their lives, all right, that were taken away in prison. Finally, they get out. They were exonerated. They're no longer the Central Park 5. Now that they're exonerated 5. But it doesn't make up for what they lost.
Right.
So for me, to start seeing things from that perspective, when I see now the videos of people getting detained by the cops, and at first they're peaceful and they don't have their hands up or anything. And the minute the cop pushes them enough and the hands go up, they get grabbed and thrown down. And I go, oh, I know why that happened. Why? Because once again, one of those conversations that I had with my father was, if you have a cop comes into your face and they're going to push you and they're going to egg you on to raise your hands, even if you're not raising your hands to hit, to raise your hands. And once you raise your hands, that's considered assaulting an officer. In their mind, they can now arrest you for assault, because basically you're raising your hand to put your hands on them and defend themselves. Okay, so but normally, if you push your hands on somebody and cause an altercation, it's considered assaulting somebody, whether you're pushing them. But yet, if the cop pushes you, all right, it gets you to that point to raise your hands. All right. Shouldn't it not be assault the same way? But you got to remember, the person that's going to arrest you and charge you with assault is the person who's pushing you. So he always taught me, if you're getting pushed and pushed to push, just keep your hands at your sides. Do not raise your hands. So when I see the guys raise their hands and immediately the officer grabs the arm and puts him behind him, he got what he wanted. So it's those kind of things that when I see what's going on, and it's like, well, I guess, and it's somebody, like I said, my father was law enforcement, had 3 sons. I'm in the middle of 3 sons. All of us at some point have been profiled, or even harassed. My brother was pulled out of a cab in Midtown going to work one day, and he got pulled out of a cab and thrown on the hood of a cab, because they thought he was a drug dealer. Right? Just because he held the cap. All right. He was, he was obviously the wrong person to hail a cab. Here's this young guy in a shirt and tie in Midtown in broad daylight. He's got to be up to something, they felt. All right. So, I can tell you, remember the Palisades Mall? Right? So Palisades Mall used to have a batting cage at the top, right? My best friend and I used to go to that batting cage quite often. When I go to a batting cage, I like to use my bat. I don't use anybody else's bat. I will bring my wood bat with me. So here we go to the batting cage. Me and my best friend, we're on the escalator going up, and we're talking, and all of a sudden, we hear a walkie-talkie going off behind us. So I turn around and we look. So here's this officer behind us, and he goes, "Hey guys, what's up with the bat?" So I said, "We're going to the batting cage." You don't have bats at the batting cage? Well, I like to use my bat.
Right.
So, but why do you have to bring a bat? Oh, that's a so. Let me get this straight. You have a batting cage. Now, if it's somebody just doing it for the heck of it, yes, they don't have to bring a bat. But if you play in a league, guess what? You're not using anybody's bat when you're playing in a softball league, a hardball league, or anything else. You're going to use your own bat, right? So, who doesn't bring what person who's serious about what they do doesn't bring a bat to a batting cage? So, the fact that he stopped us in the middle of a mall, right? Where there's a batting cage, and we told you we're going to this batting cage. We weren't walking around the mall, with the bat. We were going on the escalator straight up to the top, so we can go to the batting cage. And you think about it, somebody had to watch us come into the mall all the way up, and this is like 2 or 3 floors up. So we had been on 2 or 3 escalators because there wasn't one escalator to the top of the Palisades. You had to get off one escalator, walk around to the other escalator, then walk around again when you got up to the next floor. So they obviously had to watch us for several, floors before he eventually caught up with us. But mind you, I had seen plenty of people bringing their kids, high school kids that played on teams up there in Suffern. They brought bats. Nobody ever stopped them. When we got to the batting cage in Mount Vernon, people brought bats. So why is it all of a sudden the 2 brothers bring bats to the batting cage? There's an interrogation, right? So it was quite obviously why it happened. So the question that we go from here is, what do we do? And we talk about it all the time. And I said before, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. All right.
Correct.
We saw Black Lives Matter had this big groundswell because everybody's seeing the consistent brutality. And over the years, and people go, "Oh, this is never going away." And it's right, it's never going away. It's never stopped because they've never had to.
Exactly.
And I have plenty of friends of all races, all nationalities. Some of them go, "Oh, wow, Black Lives Matter," and they scoff at it. And I said, "But do you understand why it's there?" "Well, shouldn't all lives matter?" I said, "Yes, but here's the problem, and here's why that comes up." I said, one of them said, "Well, 3 black guys broke into these people's house and killed them. I don't see anybody protesting over that." I said, "Because I tell you what, when those 3 black guys broke into their house, when they get caught, they're going to jail."
Exactly.
Okay. I said, when Officer Mike shoots somebody and says, "I feared for my life," and you check the body camera, you check this, and it doesn't add up to his story, Officer Mike is going to get taken off the street for a little while. They're going to go through the process. He's not going to get prosecuted. Sometimes he'll keep his job. Sometimes they'll fire him. And then 90% of the time when they fire him, he goes somewhere else and works again. There's no accountability. So in other words, that black person he killed, his life did not matter because there was no justice for him. You're going to get justice when the guy on the street kills somebody, whether he's black, white, Asian. But when he comes down to it, well, usually, because we could talk about George Zimmerman, but in this case, we're talking about it where it comes down to when somebody from law enforcement steps out of their bounds and kills an unarmed black person, all right, there usually is no justice. And I can think back to the 90s, all right? Anthony Baez, all right, throwing football around in the street with his friends in the Bronx, all right? Cops were called because people complained about the noise. The football hits the police car. He gets into it with one of the cops. The cop puts him in an illegal chokehold. And this is when they said chokeholds were illegal at first, right?
Okay.
under the guy that's raving lunatic on the news now, Rudy Giuliani was the mayor at the time. Right, the cop puts Baez in a chokehold and kills him. Okay, at the end, the cop was never prosecuted. Okay, they sued the city. The family got money, and that was supposed to be it. You got paid. That's not justice. Paying somebody
No.
for a lost lawful. If you ask the Goldmans, do they feel justified in getting money from O.J. Simpson? They say no. They say O.J. Simpson should be rotting in jail. Well, it's the same thing when a cop kills somebody who's unarmed. The fact that when you go to South Carolina, and I forget the guy's name that was pulled over, found out for a busted taillight, got pulled over, found out his license is suspended. He runs away from the cop. The cop shoots him in the back. And on camera, you see him throw the taser down. And the backup cop comes there and stands there while he throws the taser on him. Right? And yet, when that case went to trial the first time, okay, it ended in a mistrial. When everything happened on camera in front of you, just like Rodney King happened on camera in front of us, and somehow we couldn't convict the guys that beat up Rodney King on camera. Here we are 20 years after that, a guy gets shot in the back. You see him plant the taser that he said he tried to wrestle away from him that he never did. It's kind of hard to do it when you're running away from him. But they wouldn't convict him. They had a mistrial. And when they talked to some of the jurors that wouldn't vote to convict, one of them said, I could not bring myself to convict a police officer. So when we talk about this problem, it's bigger than just the police, because people say, oh, it's just the bad cops. No, it's bigger than just the bad cops, because the fact of the matter is, if you do put said cop on trial, there has to be a jury willing to convict. And right now, we don't see a lot of juries willing to convict. Yeah, I think the only time I've seen a cop really get convicted of anything, and there was the Amber Geiger case where she got convicted for killing Bottom Jean in Texas. But think of the NYPD, Abner Louima. And that was a case where it was just so heinous you could not get around to convicting the guy. I mean, the cop literally took him in the bathroom and sodomized him with a plunger. I mean, I don't think that there's a jury in the world that would let him off.
Exactly.
But you think of the Sean Bell shootings. Those cops got off. It goes so happens that the only cop that didn't return to the force was the black cop. All the other guys either are still on the force or are retired by now.
Correct.
So I mean,
correct. But hold on, don't forget, in Minnesota, when the African cop shot the blonde lady, they convicted him, and then all of a sudden, Blue Lives Matter was nowhere to be found. See, it's only convenient when it's a white cop, at least to my standard. When it's a white cop, it's fine. It's Blue Lives Matter. When that cop shot that blonde woman in Minnesota, oh, what is he doing on the force? He's not stable. What are they doing? They just let anybody on. I know personally a couple dudes that I went to school with and know of that's on the force right now that, I don't know how y'all became cops. There is quite a few, you know what I mean? And it's just like, I'm just going to shut my mouth. I'm not going to say something, but it's just like, I know. Like, come on.
And I understand wholeheartely. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, tell me, where do we go from here? At this point, like I said, we come from both sides of the fence. We come from a family where people in our house who raised us wore the shield, but yet they told us, when you walk out this house, be prepared what can happen to you. So, and that's what I try to convey to people, because there are people that still don't get that when you walk out the house just like my kids walk out the house. I know for a fact friends that think that way, when I know that their kid has had several interactions with police that normally would get a black kid locked up. Their kid got off with a slap on the wrist. Right. And when I tell them that, they kind of get offended, but it's all about the truth. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you, just like you don't want to sugarcoat it for me. But tell me, what do you think we go from here? Because, like you said, it's fallen on deaf ears to this point, and at this point now, like we said, the opposite reaction is coming. You see it when the Black Lives Matter protest happens now in New York. Who's there right against them? Blue Lives Matter. And it's aggressive because they feel like they've been spit on. You look at that part of the problem, and I'll let you talk about it first, and I got something to add to it. But go ahead.
Oh no, well, no, just going back to us. You keep, how you saying you and I, we both grew up in a law enforcement household. But like, I'm pretty sure with our folks, they always told us, you're a black man first before anything. You are a
Mm-hmm.
black man. And it doesn't matter what political affiliation, what religion, how well you talk, what school you went to.
Mm-hmm.
If they find a reason not to like you, they're gonna find a way to get their way.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something that stuck with me. It was like, no matter what you do, no matter what you accomplish, they don't care about that.
Mm-hmm.
They have a purpose. They have a goal. And if they're dead set on that objective, they're going to go for it no matter what. And, and a lot of people fail to see that, and going now to answer your question, where do we go from here? It's people finally opening up their ears and their minds to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody want to listen. And every time people in this country suffer from whataboutism. Every time you try to bring up a point is, what about this? What about that? And it's like, no, just listen. Just listen to us. For example, the whole defund the police thing. Nobody's saying abolish the cops. It's just saying, hey, those millions of dollars should go to these public schools with these outdated textbooks. I was fortunate enough to go to private school my whole life. Like, my parents they busted their tails to get me to private school.
Mm-hmm.
But I was still taking the same SATs and the same courses as everybody else. That's just what they taught me. That's the route they chose for me. But when I was hanging out with my friends, I'm looking at their textbooks or what they're learning. I'm like, yo, you're kind of behind. Like, I learned this freshman year. How are you learning this now? So it's just a matter of allocating those funds to other necessary things. It seems like every time there's a budget, every time there's a city or a budget crisis, the first thing that go are children programs, after school programs, sports programs. Sports is so important to our communities because it gives us something to do. It gives us something recreational. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is that dream when you play a sport. You know what I mean? We all know we're not all going to go there, but it's that idea like, yo, there's a possibility I can go there. You know what I mean? And we're constantly defunding these schools. We're closing schools. Teachers is using their own salaries, and they don't get paid much anyway. They're using their own salaries. They pay for their own stuff. So it's just crazy. And to be honest with you, I feel like if there is a cop case, it should be trialed it should go federally. It should go to the federal level, just because you can't have the same DA that you need them for convictions convicting one of their own. It's like, it makes no sense. So they're never going to do that because their careers rest just as much on the cops as they do theirs. So it's a matter of getting an outside entity to review these cases.
And I agree with you there. I think that you can't just continue to do things the way they have been when it comes to police misconduct. Part of the problem to me is when you talk about police conduct and misconduct, when it comes down to it, are the unions. Because some of the biggest, right, when you talk about it, okay, you can have good cops that believe in it. I mean, you see it every time somebody's got, you've got somebody on there that's got a cop says something that the vast majority of people agree with, and we're sharing the videos. You show me a video where the police union head says, we were wrong. You never see it. Okay?
Not at all.
All the years I've been in New York, I have never, ever seen Pat Lynch, even when it's the most egregious, misconduct by the cop. ever say, you know what, we're sorry for his family. I'm sorry. I apologize to the family. We want justice for your family. In this case, we had a cop that acted out of protocol, and he deserves to be upheld to the strongest arm of the law, the fullest extent of the law. You never see that. Okay, with everything that's
No.
going on. Okay, when something happens to a cop, he's the first one in front of a microphone. Okay. Oh, we got to protect our cops. When all of this stuff was going down in the riot, there were riots in New York, but when the protests were happening mainly, and the clashes with the cops, he was the first one out there. Oh, so this is disrespectful. They're treating us like this. When the mayor of New York, who has biracial children, his wife is black, Bill de Blasio's wife is black, and he said that he had that conversation with his son that your father's had with you, my father's had with me. They've turned their back on him. You don't respect the police. So if any time you're confronted with your own wrongdoing, that you're going to turn around now and treat it as you're the victim, how do we fix it? Because you keep coming to us. I've been to community meetings where the cops are there and everybody's yelling at the cops, stop the gun violence in our community. And the cops like, okay, well, tell us how to help you. Okay. And when something goes down and we get a shooting in the community and they go around trying to find out who saw something, you get the people, don't snitch. So that part of the gun violence doesn't get better because you don't want to help. But on the same note, when this cop does the same thing to somebody, he shoots somebody he shouldn't have shot, and they go to ask questions about him, was it a righteous shoot? And his boys go, blue line, don't talk. Blue line, don't talk. It's the same exact thing.
But the difference is, while we're just regular citizens, their job is supposed to, morally, they're supposed to be better. They're supposed to be the moral standard of every U.S.
Absolutely.
citizen. You know what I mean?
Yes,
that's
higher standard.
And I tell my family members who are cops and my friends who are cops, I hold you to a higher standard because I know where you come from. Before all of this is how we were raised. You know better.
Yeah.
And for a little while, I was going, my cousin and I didn't see eye to eye for certain things because I'm just like, all of a sudden, you get a badge, you're a part of something, and then you automatically absorb all their ideals. You know what I'm saying? I was just like, no, you know better than that. Like, come on, that's not how we were raised. Considering that we were on the other side of the fence. And I've seen it's crazy because I've seen it. I've seen dudes like I mentioned. We've seen it. With our friends, you see them change the moment they throw on a uniform. Their whole perspective changes. It's just like, yo, where did this come from all of a sudden? And to be honest, and then I also feel like we should see, because I'm not in law enforcement. Like, do they have access to therapists? Somebody that's a psychologist, somebody there to let them just let it out? Because it's just like,
NYPD does have, I don't know about every police department. I know NYPD does have programs for that, for cops, when they feel that they're at a breaking point and they need to speak to somebody. They do have therapists. They've had plenty of them in therapists. Pat Lynch has been called out about that. And if you ask him, he still says there are zero bad cops out there. But nevertheless, you have so many, there's quite a good percentage of them do go to therapy for what they see and deal with every day. And trust me, as somebody who dealt with a man that dealt with that stuff for 30 plus years, it wears on you. My father was a very happy man for the early part of my life. And I can remember by the time he was a very grumpy man coming back home. It wears on you. It wears on you because you're dealing with stuff that you don't want to do. And some of the people you deal with and some of the situations, you're never going there on a good day. Okay, you don't call cops when something good is going on. You always call a cop when something's bad's coming on. So there was a mental fatigue to it that plays into it. But that's something that you can get help for. It's like PTSD for a soldier. You can get help for that. The problem is what we the problem that we're having is there is no help for it because nobody thinks it's a problem outside of the police force. You know, when the problem is when you get outside the police force, it's a problem. When you get inside the police, it's not a problem. No, we got it under control. It's one of two bad apples, and we discipline them. But killing somebody, you know, like, you know, you think of Philando Castile. You know, they say, well, obey instruction. Well, he obeyed instruction. Officer, I have a gun in the car. I'm going to show you my license. And he shoots him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, and as much as the NRA talks about Second Amendment, they sure as heck didn't jump up for Second Amendment on that case.
Not at all.
And the cop got it. Once again, the cop got off. Why? Because he had a gun. So the justification to killing people, see, because remember the steps in law enforcement is the police enforce the law. Okay, they're supposed to, right? When you're supposed to be Mirandized because you read your rights. So you have rights when you're being arrested. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when George Floyd was being arrested, he should have been Mirandized. They had him in the back of the car. Why you pulled him back out the car to place him back on the ground is a problem. Mm-hmm. Right? So there's no knee on the neck if you don't take him back out the car.
Exactly.
So, and it's those kind of things, those kind of that are not procedure that lead to these situations. If you do what you're supposed to do, if you're trained to do, right? If you're you know, obeying policy and also observing that person still has rights, they haven't been convicted of anything. You're arresting them because they are alleged to have committed a crime. Okay, and the fact that it only goes for certain people is a problem, and it just shows the pattern of behavior. But when you address that to the masses, there are people that say there's no pattern, there's no bad pattern. You know, the fact that you see people shoot at cops and still get arrested, and people who are unarmed get shot just for the thought they have a gun, says that, okay, well, guess what? That creates the perception to me as a civilian that, well, you know what? The biggest fear of a cop is that a black guy has a gun. That means I must die.
Right.
You know, so, and I know from, like I said, I took the exam for law enforcement. I'm glad that I didn't score in the percentile so I could turn them down. But, you know, but nevertheless, so I understood what you have to look for and what and understand the law and what you're supposed to do when you're arresting somebody. What how important the Miranda rights are, and the fact that we're not even getting to that point with people is a gross injustice. Oh, you know, and that's part of the problem to me, because one, it's like, yes, we're doing it to a certain demographic of people because of perception. That is the most brutal part of it all, and I'm part of that demographic. I could walk out this house today, and it could happen to me tomorrow. Mm-hmm. You know, and being over 300 pounds now, it's not exactly a real easy thing for me to get out of a car and somebody thinks that I did something. Guess what? Most likely there's going to be a gun drawn on me because that person is going to think they're not going to take me one-on-one. Right. So that's the reality of the situation. You know?
Yes.
Now, granted, like I said, despite the fact that I was taught to act a certain way, doesn't mean that person on the other end of the situation knows that I was taught how to act. So guess what? I could be looking down the barrel of a Glock tomorrow just because I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time.
And which is a shame.
And that is the hardest situation to convey to people who are outside of it. So that is where I'm trying to figure out is we talk about the fixing it, you know, besides procedure, how do we get other people to understand it?
Unfortunately, a lot of people don't learn until it's happened to them. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, people, you know, like, for perfect example, I hate to change topic, but COVID. A lot of people say it's a farce until it happened to them or somebody they love, and then it's, oh my God, it's real. And that's what I feel like when it comes to the police brutality for the people that don't experience it. It has to happen. I never want it to happen to anybody. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody, but it won't stop
Hmm.
until it happens to one of them. You know, I mean, if you listen to the comedy skits of the past when they're talking about the police, if you watch shows of the past that talk about the police, if
Hmm.
you don't know when that show was shot, you would think it's happened today because it's
Yeah.
just so recurrent, it's so common. And one thing that well, I don't really laugh, but it's just like, God forbid something was to happen to me, they would go on a mud slandering campaign. They would, of all the pictures I ever posted, they would try to find the one bad post to be listening to a rap song. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
just to slander me. Like the way they go out of their way to assassinate somebody's character or to bring up stuff that was irrelevant to what they're being pulled over to now, what they're being questioned to now is just, it's crazy. And the fact that people's like, well, he sold drugs, so that gives him the right to die. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
that's another thing too. It's just like people's moral compass. It's biased. It's biased. It's so biased. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Absolutely.
And it's and I mean another like one thing that I never understood is if you in a predominantly black and brown community, let's say you're in one of the boroughs, how can you have a cop that was born and raised in, let's say, Scarsdale, all of a sudden get thrown into these communities just like that? They don't know the culture. They don't know how the walk. They don't know the bop. They don't know anything really about it except what they see on TV or what some other cop told them about, trained them or what to
Hmm.
expect. Like, I feel like they should hire more cops from the community, more cops that look like the areas they're patrolling, because at least hopefully there would be a mutual understanding of that mutual respect. Like, all right, listen, they're being rowdy, they're loud, they're rowdy, but they're not really doing anything. You know what I mean?
I do,
So,
but here I'm going to play devil's advocate on this because
okay,
being about a good decade ahead of you in
okay,
age, I remember when most of the police officers were white. So, and I think it was especially in the '90s when Dinkins was our mayor in New York City. Um, One of the things they said was, if we had more black cops, they would understand how to police the community better. So, if you look at the NYPD now
okay.
compared to '80s and '90s, it's way more diverse. Okay.
Okay.
Yet, do you still have the same issues? Yeah, remember, we had a whole thing of stop and frisk, and that was done
Yeah,
after they fully integrated the police department.
true.
So realistically,
Right.
adding cops of color didn't change anything at all. Remember, you talk about um, Jesus. Now all the names are blurring together. With I just talked about um, Amadou Diallo. Okay,
Right.
remember
Right.
one of the cops in that situation, black. All right, Sean Bell, one of the cops, black. All right, so it's one of those things where if you add people of color, they're still being trained by the same cops, all right, and under the same policies that the other cops are trained under. Right, they're still being led by cops that came up under those regulations. Right, that set of procedures. Okay, so realistically, adding more diversity to the police force didn't change anything. And it was believed that that would kind of help the situation. It may have helped in small parts when you do certain outreach things, but
Right.
overall, when you talk about the situation of adding more minorities to the police force, thinking that it's going to change anything, it hasn't. One of the cops, George Floyd, one of the cops was a minority. Two of them, actually, if you're going to count the Asian cop. So the fact of the matter is, did it change anything? No, they did the same thing that a white cop in the past has done. They either joined in or just watched and said nothing. So
So,
at the end, when it comes down to it, it's Literally, we talk about Black Lives Matter versus Blue Lives Matter. To them, blue is the only colors that matters, and that's the problem. So realistically, adding minorities didn't change the fact that blue is all that matters. Right? When you come back to it, you look at it. The flag that they're carrying around, or the American flag with the blue line in it, they're blue. Right? So if you cross the blue, there's a problem. Joe Soperco crossed the blue. What happened to him?
Oh.
You know, and he was white. he was a minority. He was a white cop that said this is wrong, and he darn near got killed. So, you know, when it comes down to it, how do we fix it? It's the most complex question because realistically, there are people that try to make realistic solutions. We have more minorities. We do this. We try and change procedure to try and be a little more accommodating. But at the end of the day, you're law enforcement. Okay, your whole purpose when you're law enforcement is to pull up as the authority figure. Okay, so they come out the car as an authority figure, and if you know, so they come. It's meant to intimidate. So how do we? And for black people, they've always been intimidators. It's never really been friendly. You may have had certain instances, but if you think about civil rights, it wasn't the regular people spraying us with hoses and sicking dogs on us. Those were cops. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So you fast forward over the years, and you turn around, and whenever things have gone to a situation where, you know, you look at Crown Heights when we had the big thing in the '90s, the big Crown Heights riots. Okay, they didn't beat up the Jews; they beat up the black people that rioted. They just pushed the Jews back. Okay, and during Corona. Okay, when they were telling people, "Oh, get out of," they're locking people up. They had the big house party. 60 people got arrested. They weren't exactly doing. They weren't doing a lot of things to the Jews when they were out there on the Parkway. They finally did eventually turn the hoses on them to tell them to get inside. But for the most part, they're very patient with them. Okay, there's a different level of attention when it comes to minorities, and you know we talk about the things that are going on right now, where the federal troops are now on the streets. Okay, so here you have a situation where people are protesting police brutality. You send in federal troops who are purposely unrecognizable. So if you film them beating somebody up, nobody knows who it is. Right? And you send them there to violently remove people off the streets. Equal and opposite reaction. So we protest. Here comes the hand to slap you back. Well, now we're seeing people pushing back even harder. All right. So when you do that, either they're going to strengthen your resolve or break you. They are strengthening the resolve of the people. So at this point, what's next? It's almost like it's the catch-22 of all.
It really is. And it's just like our political leaders, not one has like, you know what? Let's talk about this. You know what I'm saying? If we need the powers that be, like, you know what? Let's do this. Let's talk about it. We're getting pandered to. We're getting streets. We're getting all these commercials and all of this. But it's like, no, nobody has yet, like you and I, nobody has yet to bring up some type of resolution, some type of solution of like, you know what? Let's start looking into this. I haven't. If I'm wrong, somebody please let me know. But I haven't heard one leader be like, you know what? Let's sit down. Let's talk. Let's bring this up. Let's see what's going on. It's, oh my God. It's you know, once again it goes back to us versus them, anarchy versus order. You know, when it's just like, no, it's just the people saying they want America to live up to the values that they say we do. You know, but we can go on forever about this.
Indeed, you know, and you know, like when we talk about it over and over and over again, you know, and It's been George Floyd, you know, Botham Jean. The list is, Sandra Bland. The list goes on and on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm now 44 years old. You know, my my oldest daughter is an adult. My youngest daughter is going into her teenage years, and I have absolutely no answer for it. As the same, just like my father had no answer for it when I was coming up. And at this point in 2020, there should be more. There should be more to this. There shouldn't be. Well, we get angry. There are some capitulations, and then we repeat the cycle all over again.
Mm-hmm.
We're past the breaking point. I think people are realizing that your generation and the generation behind you are not like my father's generation that lived through the civil rights era, that in all honesty had to take it because they couldn't do the stuff that you guys are doing now, because you saw the level of violence they faced when they had to take it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You saw what happened when the militant groups of that era started to they broke them down really fast. Whether it was the Black Panthers, whether it was the Nation of Islam, there was always a way to break them down because they were literally on the bottom end of power. In this day and age, though, you're starting to see that your generation is fed up and they're more willing to act and act out far worse than our generation could have. Even when Rodney King happened and the riots happened, there was only a certain level because you knew eventually when the police came down there in armor, you were in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that one time we were in Mount Vernon at a football game, at a high school football game, and a fight broke out, and there was somebody had a gun, and riot cops were called out.
Never saw them a day in my life until that day.
But yeah, they came out that day. And what was the first words out of the guy's mouth when he came through that crowd was "move or get beat." Okay.
Oh my God.
So
I remember that.
All right. So there's a different level that you guys are prepared to go to, because at that point it was you're going to get beat, and then everybody else is going to drag you out, and we're all going home. That's enough. We've had enough. Right.
Mm-hmm.
We'll come back out marching. We'll march again tomorrow, but we got to go heal from these lumps we just took. You guys are going to fight back. And I think they're seeing that. Whether it was Seattle, where they just took over a whole precinct, whether it was Minnesota, where they burned down a whole precinct, this isn't the same group from the 60s and 70s that sat back and said, we shall overcome. And while you beat them, still kept marching, we shall overcome. I think this group is different. And I think that's caught the eye of people. And which is one reason why you have the federal troops out there now doing what they're doing, because this guy only understands one thing, and that's to unleash the dogs. And it's funny that the guy that's unleashing the dogs is a guy who would never have done it himself. And that's and that would be correct, Joel. They did do that in Philadelphia. Yes, you would be correct.
I remember that. It's just a topic it's, to be honest, it's a never ending topic, because it's just like, just so many ideas and just so many historic references to pinpoint or to bring up. And I think what's happening, the movement now, is the creation of smartphones.
Mm-hmm.
Is the fact that you can get it everywhere. Because back in the civil rights era, I mean, TV was big, but it's not like how it is now. Technology, you see it. People all over the world is seeing what's going on right now.
Well, absolutely, absolutely.
And it's just like, wow. And it's just not us that's going through this issue. It's all over. People is just fed up, and that's what you're seeing right now. I mean, if it wasn't called Black Lives Matter, let's just say it went by another name, would these people still have the same convictions towards it? Or is it just the fact that they just see black and it's just like, you know what? No.
That you would be definitely correct on that. Once you put the word Once you put the word black in front of anything except for Monday, most people have a problem with it. Or Black Friday, I should say. Not even Black
Right.
Monday. Black Monday is a bad day in the NFL for head coaches, but Black Friday is deal day. Everybody wants to get excited and go running out the door at 4 a.m. But you put it black in front of Lives Matter, and there are people that have a problem because all of a sudden they have an inferiority complex saying, oh, but it shows you, we talked about it earlier, when that black person is killed by a cop unjustly, there have been limited cases where that person has gotten justice. So you have told us by adjudicating the cases or lack thereof, because some cases they don't even go to trial, that you have told us that our lives don't matter. And that is why that movement is called exactly what it is. And there are people that don't want to see that. There's people that still didn't want to see racism alive in America, but yet tell them you take away the Confederate flag and every racist comment comes up. So, and trust me, I've driven down 13 south of Virginia for 40 plus years of my life. And it wasn't until less than 4 years ago that the gas station at the border of Maryland and Virginia on 13 South changed its name to Dixieland. And how it has Confederate flags on it, says where the South starts here. Okay. And they weren't emboldened to do that before. All of a sudden they're emboldened to do it now. So it's become the hip move that if that's what you believe, nobody can take that away from you. One thing that kind of annoys me with this situation is because this is where Black Lives Matter also comes into it. People say everything's so PC now. Everything's so politically correct. You offend everybody with everything. This plays back into, you want to talk about policing and two different methods of policing when it comes to communities. Well, it also goes to how you speak to people. So all of a sudden now there's a movement where people are saying, well, everybody shouldn't be offended so easily. Well, for many years, if you were white and you said something offensive, it didn't really matter. If somebody was offended, you'd hash it out.
Uh-huh.
For many years, black people had to always watch what they said. Right? Emmett Till is dead because somebody thought he said or did something. Martin Luther King is dead because he said too much. Malcolm X is dead because he said too much. Medgar Evers is dead because he said too much. So black people have always had that. You have to watch what you say.
Yep.
So when you talk about everything so PC, well, it's finally to the point where what everybody else feels matters, because it didn't matter when you said something to somebody. If you called somebody the N-word, we can get upset all we want. But if we acted out, we were still a bad guy. But if I did something that offended you guys, usually the cops came, they looked at me anyway. So no matter what, there was always a double standard of, what, minorities said and did mattered a lot more than what white people said. So now when you come back to it with, policing, you say, well, y'all police us differently. This is why this happens. This is why that happens. And they go, no, they don't. Yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
And it's been proven, So it comes back to, where do we go from here? Well, the double standards have to go away. And it has to go away not just with how we treat each other, but how we police each other. The behaviors of police officers have to be held accountable just as much as you hold the civilians accountable, if not more. So you want bad cops to stop doing things? Well, you got to prosecute them. And prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law, like you would Joe the drug dealer.
Correct.
Because if that's the case, there's for a while it was, well, if you prosecute the drug dealers enough, and we'll get them off the streets. It hasn't worked, but they keep trying. So maybe you should try that same effect with the cops that decide to shoot unarmed people because they're afraid to do the job. Because to me, if you're going to have a cop, and we always see a cop that dies in a line of duty, and we say, just like a soldier, they gave the ultimate sacrifice. We need to honor him.
Correct.
Well, shouldn't we chastise the guy that's afraid for his life all the time, that shoots people because he's afraid for his life, because he doesn't want to do the job, as they say? And then when he does that and takes an innocent person's life, shouldn't he be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, since he couldn't do what a good cop should do, and that is protect and serve at the cost of his life? Because at the end of the day, that's what you make that swear yourself in, and you uphold that oath of office as a law enforcement officer. That's part of what you're swearing an oath for, and an oath that I was not good enough to take.
Gotcha. It's just something that, I mean, in a perfect world, I mean, it's just, I just wish people listened. That's all. I just want people to have a healthy discussion, because there's so much that can be resolved if people just listened. And you know what? And is willing to adjust their opinion. Like, okay, you know what? You're right. Or you know what? Let me look into that. But people are just so stuck in one way of thinking, it's hindering our growth. It's just hindering. You have to be able to see both sides. Nobody's saying play both sides. Somebody's saying listen to both sides. And I don't know what to say anymore, because it's just like, it's something that our grandparents have to deal with, our parents. It's something that we're living through. I don't have any kids yet, but if it's something that does happen, I want to be able to tell him or her, like, this is what happened, and this is finally, years after talking, we got some form of resolution. Like the fact that my grandfather had to talk with my father, and then I had to get the talk. It's just crazy. It's crazy, and the people outside don't understand that. The different type of talks. We get the talk. Yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. But then we always gotta get that extra talk. Hey, listen, you know what? Sometimes you don't want to talk too aggressive, or you don't want to make certain movements. You don't want to do this. You want to do that. That, as like, you go to that secret menu. You don't want to have that other talk, that secret talk. Like, hey, listen, you don't want to do that. So I just hope through all of this, I just hope that all of this is not being done in vain. I hope all of this is not being done and falling on deaf ears. I truly hope that we can build from this, and that, we can just get better from here. The way we hold up our ideals, the way we try to, and when I say we, I'm talking about the United States, I'm talking about us as Americans, the way we, we want to present ourselves, the way we want to show ourselves to the world, right now it's not looking too good for us. And that starts from starting from the top. But that's neither here nor there. But just hopefully we can just build from this and just take it from there. And I am down to 2% coach.
So I'm about to wrap it up. So, first of all, thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me on.
Yes, so I wanted to put this out there because, once again, people forget that there are people of color on both sides of this, and correct. I wanted that perspective to come from both of us, being that we're both, once again, come from families of law enforcement. We experience it. We've seen
correct.
it. So, overall, thank you for joining us.
I really do appreciate you having me on.
Indeed.
I'm just trying to get my charger. I'm sorry, Coach, before I shut off.
So definitely. Thank you for everybody that stayed on to watch this. I'm hoping that this kind of brought a little perspective to it. If you are, no matter what side of the equation you are on right now, I hope we at least brought some kind of enlightenment to you. Our experiences hopefully brought a little perspective if you were skeptical of how things are, why people are upset, and hopefully as a country we can figure this out, because I tell you right now, this is not a situation that's easy to fix, and it's not going to go away tomorrow. All right, so thank you again, Alex, for coming on. Thank you everyone that's been watching and commenting in the chat. If we have more of an opportunity to do more talks like this, by all means, I will definitely get a chance to put those out to you. Just a shameless plug. Back to sports content, Wednesday night, no huddle necessary. I'm your host. Once again, 3 Nuts and Bolts sports panelists. We talking football, college, and pro, 9 o'clock Eastern. All right, watch for the live stream and the link for that as well. And thank you very much once again. I'm going to mute you now. I don't want to get the crackling out of the background. All right. That's right. Thank you very much once again for watching, and everybody have a great night.